Hey, welcome to the October question and answer time. We're a little bit late this month because, we had hurricanes. So the cleanup has been crazy. I haven't had any time to do a lot of filming, and probably those of you that are local, either for Milton or north for Helene, we haven't had time anyway. So it is the middle of October. We still have a couple weeks left to get outside, get into the gardens. Hopefully some of the cleanup is kind of past us now. So we've got a little bit of time to get our brains wrapped around all of the tasks that get to be done this month. Honestly, this is one of my favorite months to be in the garden. When I was in Kansas City for 15, 16 years, I loved the fall. The fall and the springtime is just so beautiful, so ideal. Up in Michigan, my family is already hunting. They're starting to heat with a wood stove already. My mom put all of her flower beds to sleep for the winter, cutting back some of the perennials. She leaves a lot of them for seeds for the wild songbirds, but it is that time of the year. So whether you are watching this as a video on the tube of you, or you're listening to this as an audio version on Patreon or the podcast, I want to first of all say thank you so much to the Patreon community. It's because of your monthly support and your subscriptions that I'm able to continue to produce this type of content that is hopefully helpful to many of you and your farms, your homesteads, and your family properties. So before we get into the question and answer stuff, those questions are supplied by our Patreon community. I do want to hit on some of the top things that I would recommend doing in the garden this month, depending on what growing zone you're in. So I always like to divide these into two different categories: our cold temperate climate and our warmer tropical or arid climates. So let's do USDA zones 3 through 8 first. So if you're living in USDA zones 3 through 8, there's a couple things that you can really be focusing on this time of year. So the first and most important thing for you guys in the cold temperate climates is covering your soil before the winter. Now, it doesn't really matter how you do it, whether it's with wood chips or grass clippings or chopped up leaves, whatever it happens to be, just cover it. Just cover it. You can use hay, you can use straw, you can use a green mulch, that I'll talk about in just a minute. Just cover the soil. You just don't want your soil exposed to the elements all winter long. It's bad for the microbial life. It's going to cause runoff if you get any winter rains or winter moisture. It's going to cause that topsoil to be able to blow away. You want to keep that soil covered, protect that microbial life as much as humanly possible. Now, the second thing that I would recommend doing, it's kind of tied into that covering of the soil, is this is kind of your last chance to be doing cover crops on a more mass scale. Now, especially if you guys are in USDA zones 5, 6, 7, 8, you can still get a little bit of time that you might be able to do some winter peas or winter legumes or winter wheat. Now, if you're in like zone 7 or 8, if you're in Kentucky or Tennessee or Georgia, you've probably got time to do radishes and turnips still. Now, you're not going to get, big vegetables from them. You're not going to get the big tubers. However, you are going to get a nice cover crop that's going to keep that soil protected over the winter months. Now, whether this is in a back home, backyard garden, or it's on a larger scale in your main crop garden, or even in a food plot area for deer hunting, this is still an okay window. It's not the ideal. Should have really did it last month, but you've still got 2 weeks left here that you might get some good growth to cover that soil. So last and most important thing, in my opinion, as a foodie, garlic. Y'all, it is time. If you are in USDA zones 3 through 8, plant your freaking garlic. I forgot so many years, and I kicked myself so often for not planting garlic. It got to be springtime and summer, and I'm wanting to start cooking Italian food or just, pickled garlic. Didn't have it. Now is your time. So go get your garlic, do whatever you have to do. If you literally can't find a nursery that's selling garlic to break apart and plant, just go to the grocery store and buy some good organic garlic that's still a little bit firm. If it's sprouted, even better, and just get it in the ground. So I would say those are the three things. I'll give an honorable mention for 3 through 8. Cover your soil, plant those last chance cover crops, and plant your garlic. Now, as an honorable mention for USDA zones 3 through 8, I would do a late fall foliar spray to prevent the larvae of some of the bugs, especially on apple trees, that sort of thing in the orchard. Get a Basic H and a neem spray once the trees have dropped all their leaves. Now, don't worry about it until they've dropped all their leaves, because if you spray when the leaves are on, you're not going to be able to coat all of the branches, get into the bark really good. So wait until all those leaves fall. Basic H and neem, and that's going to put your trees to bed for the winter and take care of any eggs or larvae that is in there that might be a problem come springtime. So now if you're in USDA zones 9 through 11, this is our weird transitional month. So food forest is going to bed, annual vegetable garden is waking up, it's really kicking into high gear. So our to-do list is kind of divided a little bit. It's both getting ready for growth and putting things to sleep for the winter, kind of a weird paradox. So the first thing that I would do if you're in USDA zones 9 through 11 is get your annual vegetables in the ground. So if you have nightshades, so your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplants, those more long season crops, it's too late to start them from seed. However, you can transplant them now from your little seedlings. You can go buy seedlings. But it is time to have those nightshade plants in the ground. Now, if you have a lot of green seeds, your Swiss chards, your beets, those shorter season cold crops, you're okay to do those by seed still. So go ahead and still get those seeds in the ground. The arugula, the mustard green, the kametsuna, all things greens, get them in the ground. Just start planting them in trays, whatever you've got to do. Now, in the annual vegetable garden, this is the time to be focusing on green growth. So think nitrogen-based soil amendments, your fish emulsion, some sea kelp to help with the root stimulation, blood meal. Those are all going to be your go-tos for amending your annual vegetable soil. Now, the second thing that I would do is focus a little more in the food forest, and that's mulching and covering. So you're going to get that last bit of mulch on there. I go 6 to 8 inches deep. Stay away from the trunk of the tree. So if this flower pot is your tree, I'm going to stay about 5 or 6 inches away from the trunk because I don't want wood chips touching my trunk. That could cause rot or insect problems on the base of the tree. Plus, I want that root flare to still be able to breathe. So I would be mulching 6 to 8 inches deep. I know that sounds ridiculous, but you will thank me in the springtime because over the winter months, that's all going to be decomposing. The earthworms are coming up, the mycorrhizal fungi is feasting on it, and you are improving your soil so much over the winter months. It doesn't matter if it ties up nitrogen this time of year because you're not getting green growth anyway in your winter months. So this is the time to mulch around those fruit trees. Now, if you're in the hurricane zones, get on Chip Drop, start driving by and asking those tree pruners and the linemen to drop off wood chips. This is like gold. After storms like this, there are so many tree companies that are just overwhelmed. They don't want to be driving these wood chips off site. They want to drop them and put them on your site, especially if you're close and around the corner. So keep your eyes open, get those wood chips in and cover that soil. Now, the third thing that I would focus on, which you can probably see out my window here, you'll be seeing the songbirds come in. Focus on songbird feeding. Couple reasons why. One, because the migratory birds are coming from the north. They're visiting us now here in the south. So it is fun to watch those birds. I think it's a really good kids activity. So you're capturing the migratory birds. You're providing visual entertainment. But the third thing as well is this is your insect control. So this is a great way for those songbirds to be your natural defense against caterpillars and other pests that are going to be getting in your garden all winter. So if you think you have a caterpillar problem, you don't. You have a wild songbird shortage. So if you want to go more in depth on this, if you're in the Patreon community, I just posted the last couple weeks a long class, 30, 45 minutes, of how to feed the wild songbirds and the benefits that those wild songbirds bring to your garden and to your food forest. I get into what types of seed you want to use to attract certain types of birds, different feeder styles, the whole gamut. So jump into that class if you're more interested in that. So as a recap for zones 9 through 11, first is annual vegetable season. Second is mulching in the food forest. And third is feeding those wild songbirds. So time to get into the monthly Q&A. Gotta have a sip of my nice coffee. I always switch my coffee flavors coming into fall season. So what I typically do is I'll add like just a sprinkling of cardamom when I'm brewing it. And then usually about November, December, I'll do like a sprinkle of cinnamon. So it's just, that gives that nice, good flavor in the coffee. So right now I have cardamom coffee. So as you're getting ready to jump into the Q&A stuff, these questions are provided by our Patreon community. I used to do these live, but it was just too hard for me to track with the questions at the same time as trying to give, thorough answers. So question number 1 from our patrons, I'm going to read this here, is what are some herbs or plant medicine that I can be using during cold and flu season? So I am a master herbalist. I cannot recommend anything to treat or diagnose you or anything along those lines, but I can tell you what I would be doing, what I am doing to use plants as food and as medicine to help heal my body, and then you can adapt this to your own body. So the first one that I have in my my pharmaceutical cabinet is I have mullein. So mullein is really USDA zones 4 through 8. It's like Indian toilet paper, we call it. So mullein is my absolute favorite as an expectorant. So if you have a wet cough, this is something you could do potentially as a tea to help get the gunk out. So this is really, mullein is only going to be good for you if you've got a wet cough, if you've got a lot of sinus, if you need to get the gunk out, mullein could be a great choice. The second one that I like to use is called lungwort. So lungwort is good for the moisturizing and the soothing of the bronchial tract. So I like to use this for a dry cough, a sore throat, really raspy. Mullein is going to be good for lubricating and for soothing the dryness. So if you have a wet gunk, you want to use mullein. If you have the dry, horse stuff, you want to use the lungwort. The third one in my medicine cabinet, I would say, is Biden's alba or Spanish needle. This is basically anti all the things. So it's antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, anti. You can literally use every aerial part of Spanish needle. So you can use the leaves, young or old. You can use the flowers. You can use the stems, whatever. Any of those parts can be used as a tea or a tisane, or you can tincture them using a liquor like vodka. And there's a separate video on how to make those for patrons. So the Spanish needle to me is like my go-to. If I'm starting to feel something, I'm taking a dropper full of that tincture like 5 times a day. But that is my literal go-to, all things. The fourth one in my medicine cabinet, I would say, is elderberry. I use this mainly as a syrup. Elderberry should not be taken fresh. It has to be cooked at 135 degrees or higher. Otherwise, it can cause a lot of stomach upset and it has some toxicities to it. Elderberry is not one that you should take on the daily basis because you can overstimulate your immune system, which you definitely don't want to do. It should also not be taken for SARS-CoV because it can cause a cytokine storm because it can overstimulate the immune system. So a normal flu, cold, the sniffles, whatever, elderberry is great to take for, that week or 2 week period and then back off. But again, you parents that are those helicopter parents, you don't want to be giving elderberry syrup every single day to your kids. Their body is going to get used to it and it actually is going to lessen their natural body immunities in the long term. So the fifth one, I would say, because I got to have 5, I can't just stop at 4, would be magnesium. Personally, I use a magnesium. I don't get any money from this company. By Wild Foods Co. It's a full spectrum magnesium. They use 7 different sources of magnesium that are all good for different things. Now, magnesium as a mineral actually impacts about 160 different types of bodily functions. Everything from sleep patterns, muscle aches and pains, your rest cycle, detoxification of the liver and the kidneys. So many different bodily functions are regulated by magnesium. Now, what most people do is they buy magnesium from the store, and it has 1 or 2, sometimes 3 different types of magnesium. Generally magnesium citrate, which is the least expensive, but it really is only good for constipation. So it doesn't really help any of those other bodily functions. So for those systems, I need magnesium citrate, magnesium orate, magnesium sulfate. There's so many other different types of magnesiums that really benefit the body. So for me, I personally take the Wild Foods Co. Full spectrum source of magnesium. They say to take 3 a day. I found for me, 2 is my sweet spot. I take them in the evenings. Minerals are great to take at night before bed. Really helps dial the body down and helps me enter sleep. If I take 3, which is the recommended dosage, I feel like I'm a little groggy in the morning. So kind of like magnesium hangover-ish, So I found for me and my body, 2 is the sweet spot. So second question, what can I do for cover crops in 6B? This particular Patreon member is in Connecticut. So if you're in 6B, you're kind of at the end. The next 2 weeks, you could still do winter wheat, and you could still do a winter pea or a Siberian pea. Those are gonna be okay. You're not gonna get as much of the biomass, but you are gonna get enough of a covering to where it's gonna protect your soil for the winter. If you get an early freeze and crazy cold winter, I would just go back to using chopped up leaves, grass clippings, hay, or straw. If you're worried you're not going to have time. Now, if you're in USDA zones 3 through 5, you're probably too late to be doing a lot of living green cover crops. So get some straw, get some hay. You could even just go to farmers and say, hey, I want your old hay that's too old for you to feed your cattle this year, but I'm just going to use it as a cover crop. How much would you charge to deliver a roll? Those round bales, beloved, they're so much cheaper than buying the square ones. You can buy a round bale for between 40 and 70 or 80 bucks delivered. Or you can buy a square bale. I mean, my gosh, right this year, square bales are so expensive. I saw it was at a Popular Tractor store for $17 for 1 square. That is ridiculous. Now, I would ask your farmer if they're using Grazon. If they're using Grazon as herbicide, skip it, don't even buy it. You're gonna do more harm than good. So that's what I would do in zone 6B. Question number 3, what to do with fallen oak leaves? Are fallen oak leaves or acorns gonna be safe for my potted plants? So yes, for the most part. So the one caveat with oak leaves is they can be a little bit acidic, and those tannins can kind of funkify your soil. So it's good if you're wanting to kill some of the bad bacteria. It's going to be really good for anything that loves acidic soil. Jabuticaba, pineapples, grapes, those are really going to thrive. Olive trees in that little bit more acidic, high tannin soil. Going to be amazing for citrus. So oak leaves around citrus, those tannins can actually help be a preventative for the citrus greening disease. So if you've got any type of citrus trees, those oak leaves are going to be fantastic for that. Generally speaking, any leaves that I'm going to put around fruit trees, I run them over a few times with my push mower just to help speed up the decomposition process, especially if you're in Florida and you have those live oaks or swamp oaks. The leaves can tend to be like little dishes and hold the water to prevent the water from going down into your soil. So that's a no bueno for me. So I typically, if it's a leaf, compost or a leaf mulch that I'm using, run it over a couple times with the mower and then put it on just to help speed up that decomposition process. Question number 4, my jujube is splitting. Moment of silence. That sucks. I love me some jujubes. If you're in Florida, jujube is basically what you should be growing instead of apples. People in Florida keep trying to grow apples. Stop trying to grow things out of your zone. Yes, I know UF has told us that Dorset and Anna do great. Meh. They're the better producing of the ones in Florida. Here's my blatantly honest opinion. The best apple year in Florida, the best, like the year that your apple trees are doing phenomenal, is kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you get an apple and you're like, that was not great. That's Florida's best year. Like it just is. So you can put all this time and energy into doing apples or just grow something that's going to do well here and yet can let Canada through like Georgia do the apples. Like just let zones 3 through 8 do the apples. Go buy them organically and then bring them in. Skip the apples. Grow jujubes instead. Jujubes do so much better for us. Jujubes you can actually grow literally USDA zones, I think 4, like northern Michigan, all the way down to like Miami can grow green giant jujubes. So jujube are so fantastic. They're in the top 5 plants in traditional Chinese medicine. Absolutely amazing. So that's my promo for jujubes. So when your jujube splitting, a couple different things to consider. One, is it above the graft or below the graft? If it's on the graft or below, you got some hard decisions to make. If it's above the graft, a couple things that you could do. So either one, you could try and brace it and reconnect it. So if this is where it's splitting here, I would take my knife and just shave down here and here on the inside of that V and try and join it back together and wrap it really tight until springtime and hope for the best. If you take it off and it's still split, you're gonna have to sacrifice one, but you could potentially try and brace it and then let it fuse back together by making sure that the cambium layer, that first layer of fresh green, is actually touching on both of your joints. The second thing that you consider, this is probably what I would do, is air layer the weakest one. So whatever one is your weakest of those or it's splitting the most, come up a little bit and do an air layer around it. There's a separate tutorial video on how to air layer for those of you in the Patreon community. So insert that 30 to 45 minute class here. The other option, I guess, would just be to cut it off and remove it and just cut your losses. Literally choose the strongest one, usually the one that's going to be the most straight up and down, and just cut off the other one and junk it. They're not going to root really well from cuttings, if at all. So those are kind of your options. But I'll be honest with you, even if you lose what's above the rootstock, I have 2, I think they were sold to me as green giant jujubes, and they did okay. The fruit was good. I like the flavor of the rootstock better than the actual fruit. So if it breaks off totally, I would just let it regrow and see what happens. Don't sacrifice the whole plant or dig it up. See what you can kind of come up with first. So question number 5, sorry about that dramatic pause while I sip my coffee. Where do I get sugar cane for planting? Honestly, Asian grocery stores. My personal favorite is the Latte Plaza Market in Orlando. But pretty much any Asian stores, you can get like full canes of jujube. I'm talking like 3 feet long for like $2 to $6 a piece. I would not waste my time on the green. The green sugar cane gets pretty invasive here in Florida. So if you're going to be growing that, you just really got to be on it or do it in a controlled environment. But they do sell both the red and the black, and literally for $6. And it's a pretty easy success rate. When I cut them so you have like a 3-node stretch, 1 node above, 2 nodes below the soil level, and just neglect the heck out of them. Do not overwater them because they will rot. So sugarcane are very susceptible to disease. So when you cut your length, use like a little, I use like a, what do they call them? Those little hand jigsaws that are like U-shaped, because I want really fine tooth cutting. Don't use clippers because it's gonna break the sugar cane itself, like the trunk, and that's gonna increase your risk of disease. Once you cut your length, dip each end in cinnamon, and that will help cauterize the end. If you don't have cinnamon, you could do wood ash as well, the white wood ash, and that'll help cauterize it, and then just plant it, neglect the heck out of it, and hope for the best. This is not really the best time to be doing sugarcane. If you wanna be doing that from cuttings, probably like end of February through the end of March is really your better window when the grasses are coming back. So that's my thought. Question number 6, what fruit trees can I plant this month? Awesome question. USDA zones 3 through 8, focus on your native fruit trees. So things like your mulberries, your persimmons. So anything that's going to be in that native category, you can totally dormant plant. It's a great time of year to do it because you're still getting a little bit of fall rain. Now, if you wait until November, you're pretty much into dry season, and then you're going to have to keep things moist. So I'm not going to worry about that. But you've still got a couple weeks so you can dormant plant some of those. Now, if you're in USDA zones 9 through 11, all winter long, I'm talking October, November, December, January, February, think loquat, mulberries, peach, plum, nectarine, most of the berries can actually be planted. So any of those are going to be cold hardy. So again, it's those loquats, the persimmons, peach, pear, plum, nectarine, any of those guys can go in the ground now. You're done with tropical planting. So don't plant avocados, don't plant mangoes, don't plant strawberry trees, don't plant Suriname cherry, any of those that are ultra tropical. It's too late. Wait until February, March to be able to even start with those guys again. Question number 7, if I'm in a warm area that has been predicted to have a warmer winter, does that change the fruit trees that I can plant? If you're a mad scientist, yes. You could try and plant an ultra cold hardy avocado, like, you know, Joey or Fantastic, that's going to be hardy down to like 15 to 17 degrees. But honestly, I wouldn't risk it. What that's mainly going to mean for you is it's going to be easier annual vegetable planting. But the thing with winter is it's not just do you get a freeze. The day length is a lot shorter. You're getting a lot less water because the winter months in most USDA zones 9 to 11 are very dry. So it's still not a great time to be doing those fruit trees and those berry bushes. So kind of it helps with your annual vegetables, but it doesn't really help that much with your fruit trees. So question number 8 is on hurricane cleanup. How do I use those ashes from the burn piles? Awesome question. So I do have a free article on permaculturefx.com. Just type in ashes in the search bar. That's at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're in the blog, I think it shows up at the top of the screen. Just type in ashes and you'll see how to use wood ash in the garden, in the food forest. There's a lot of ways that you can use them. Just keep in mind that wood ash is very, very alkaline, and it's like the phrase that your kindergarten teacher said, a little dabble do ya. So if you're in Florida, our soil tends to be pretty alkaline anyway, so I'm not using that as much in the food forest. I will add it in a large compost pile as an activator to add nutrients to the soil, but I use it a lot in Florida for other things. So I'm using it in like lakes or larger ponds or streams to control algae. I'll do burn pits a lot more than I will do burn piles. So dig a big hole, fill it in, burn there, and then you can cover that back up with the soil. So that way it's almost like a little bit of a biochar type concept, but I don't have to worry about my top layers of topsoil where I'm growing that are going to be impacted as much by the alkalinity. So there are a lot of ways that you can use those wood ashes. So again, I would just check out that free article at permaculturefx.com, go to the blog, and then search for ashes. And that would be probably the easiest solution. Question number 9, is there a way to use logs and branches from fall or hurricane cleanup without having to burn them or just letting them sit and attract critters? That's a super good question. And yes, make a hugelkultur mound. So you have a couple options. You can either do it one as a really big round mound, or you can lengthen it out and like pile them up in rows. And so think like agroforestry style. So when you do hugelkultur, think big chunks all the way up to little chunks and little particles. So at the very bottom of that pile are my logs, my bigger branches. Then I'm doing smaller sticks. Then I'm getting smaller with my matter. So I'm using like leaves, I'm using grass clippings, I'm using chunks of compost, veggie scraps, that sort of thing. Then I'm gonna do some regular compost followed by topsoil or sand. And then I just water it in really, really well and let it sit. Now, Sepp Holzer, one of the founders of permaculture, he would do these massive hugelkultur mounds. And even in the Swiss Alps, they were growing citrus. I kid you not. So it really does help with radiant heat from that ever composting. It massively lessens how often you have to water, because those logs, as they decompose, are basically like giant sponges underneath of the soil. So you almost never have to water. So a lot of really cool benefits to those hugelkultur mounds or those hugelkultur rows. I remember when I was at Zaytuna Farm in Australia, and they were doing these massive hugelkultur agroforestry rows. And they did this cool guerrilla style gardening where they took tons of mixed seeds, like all of their leftover seeds that they're like, is this good? Is this bad? I don't really want to waste my time because a seed could be junk. They'd put them all in one container and just go spread them all over these hugelkultur mounds and just see what came up. And it was some of the most productive gardens that they had were these just random guerrilla garden plantings. So if you got old seeds and you're like, what do I do with them? I'd give it a shot and just see what happens. So, coming down to the end of this month, it's a great time to dial down. Try some of those little projects that you've kind of been wanting to get to, but just haven't gotten there yet. So in the next month or two for me, I'm going to be doing a couple really fun new classes on Patreon. One of them I'm so excited to do is Sepp Holzer's bone sauce. So if you have a problem with deer getting into your food forest, I kid you not, this is the only thing I have ever found that works 100% of the time against deer, and it works for 15 or 20 years. That is not an exaggeration. I thought it was literally some internet gimmick until I tried it, and it literally has not failed one time. So I'm going to do a full class on how to make Sepp Holzer's bone sauce, full demo using deer bones from my hunting season last year. The second class I'm really excited about for Patreon for next month is doing the 18-day Berkeley method of composting. So how do you go from big old compost pile to pure black gold compost in literally 18 days? This is one of the best ways to do composting because it's super fast and you can really regulate, is it fungally dominated, bacterially dominated, and you get a lot of bang for your buck in a really short, almost 3-week window. So 2 classes I'm really excited about that'll be coming to Patreon here in the next 2 months. So thanks again for listening, for jumping into this monthly Q&A. If this is your first time joining us, make sure you check out the blog at permaculturefx.com, where we do free monthly to-do list of everything you need to do in your garden, your food forest, on the homestead, with chickens in the pasture, wild songbirds, and even activities with kids. Or if you're wanting to go really in depth, consider checking out Patreon. We have about 55 different classes and documents and video shorts that are uploaded in there for those of you that want to go really, really in depth in your gardening journey. And there is a free 7-day trial on there. So if you just want to binge watch and just see what you can do in 7 days and then just cancel, you're more than welcome to do that. So again, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you again to the patrons. It's your support and your subscriptions that make this doable and make this available for so many other people. So as always, have fun, and I will see you in the garden.